Yo, what's up, guys? Inswain with Inswain Audio back again, like we always do. Back with another tutorial. This time we're going to be talking about why your mix doesn't sound good in the car. Come on, I know it doesn't. Let's find out why. Alright, so the first reason that your mix might not sound good in the car, and this, might seem obvious, but I've never heard anyone say it, and that's because your car doesn't sound good. It doesn't have the best speakers. It's not a perfect listening environment, right? There's a reason that we have studios designed the way that we do because cars aren't made for listening to music. Of course, we can do it and we do often, but that's not what they're made for. They're made to drive around, not to be a listening environment. So, well, you can get your music to sound like other music in the car. You might just be being overly critical of your own music because you're listening that way to it and you're checking your mix with that intention in your car when it's not made for that. So, not that it's a bad thing to check your mix in the car, but you got to remember it's not supposed to sound good in there. If it sounds good in the car, it's not going to sound good in a real listening environment. So, don't be too hard on yourself about that. With that being said, let's say you want to do the car test and you are accurately comparing it to other music, referencing it to other songs that sound good. Why doesn't yours sound as good or the same in the car as these songs do? Usually, and most of the time, it comes down to low end for various reasons. One, it could be uncontrolled low end, and what I mean by that is the dynamics aren't controlled, um, or the frequencies are off. We need a nice, tight, solid, well balanced low end for it to sound good in the car. If it's too flabby, too much of certain frequencies are resonating, it's not going to sound good in the car. Like I said, our speakers aren't perfect in there, so they're not going to be able to properly recreate them. And it's not going to sound good in that little box that we're driving around in. So having an uncontrolled low end is definitely going to be an issue. Also, you might have too much low end. Assuming that it's controlled, it could just be too loud. Too much low end is going to sound bad in the car. It might sound good to the people walking down the street, hearing you drive by from outside of the car, but within the car, it's not going to sound good. It's going to drown out the rest of your mix, and we don't want that because you worked so hard on that top end. You don't want to get it drowned out by the low end. And the third way that bass could be ruining your mix in the car is not enough. Right, opposite end of the spectrum here. If you don't have enough low end, it's not going to hit hard in the car, especially with like hip hop, modern pop, modern contemporary genres. They rely on the low end a lot. And if you don't have enough, it's going to sound weak in comparison to other mixes in the car. So make sure you got your low end at the right level, nice, tight, dialed in, proper frequencies, nice and compressed. Get it the way that you want it to sound, and it'll sound good in the car. Another reason that your mix might not sound so great in the car is because you're too used to hearing it in your studio, on your monitors or your headphones or wherever you mixed it on. You're too used to hearing it there. It's similar to demo-itis where you get used to the demo, but this is like, mix-itis, or you're getting, studio-itis. You're getting used to how it sounds where you worked on it. And then when you hear it anywhere else, it's going to sound different, obviously. So you interpret that as bad because you got so used to it, right? It's like when we listen to a song and then the remix comes out and it's different. We always, even if we end up liking the remix more at first, it sounds off to us because we got so used to the original. The same thing goes for your mix. When you get used to it and listen to it on repeat over and over and over in the same area, when we listen on a different playback system, it's going to sound different and we're going to interpret that as not as good. So maybe your mix does sound fine in the car. You're just not used to it yet. So, take some time to get used to it. And as you do this more, you'll start to be accustomed to different systems, how things translate, and you'll be able to, adapt to this change faster. But just keep this in mind next time you're doing your car check with your mix, that give your time some acclimate to your car system and how it plays your mix. Because there's no way around it. All right, and this one I think is the biggest reason why our mixes don't translate to the car, and that's a poor listening environment where we mix. So if we have a not ideal studio or playback system or room treatment, headphones, yada yada, whatever it may be, if it's not ideal or we're not used to it or we aren't able to make it work, then our mixes are not going to translate to the car. They're not going to translate anywhere, to be honest, because if you're mixing in a non-ideal environment and you make it sound perfect in there, well, you just made a perfectly non-ideal song. And of course, it's not going to translate, right? So we need to, and I know it's not realistic to have a perfect listening environment, but we need to do what we can. And how do we do that? We use reference tracks. Because even if we have a not ideal listening environment, if we make our songs sound similar or as good as a reference track in that not ideal environment, we know that it's going to translate everywhere because we have a rough ballpark reference that we can mimic and we can get similar to, right? So this mix that the reference track we're assuming is quote unquote perfect, right? We play it in a non-perfect environment. We're not listening to it in its true form. We're not hearing everything properly, but we know that it was mixed properly. So as long as we get our mix to sound like the reference roughly, we don't want to copy it exactly, but as long as we get it to sound roughly the same, then we know that it's going to translate and it's going to sound how it should and how it's supposed to. So it all comes down to reference tracks. I'm starting to even realize myself now, recording these tutorials, that seems to be like the answer to a lot of things is use reference tracks, and that will help you translate your mixes and get them to hit hard in the car, because let's face it, we know you're doing the car check. We all do it. It's okay. That's how you're going to get your mix to hit hard in the car, is use reference tracks. All right, so that's why your mixes aren't sounding the best in the car and how you can kind of fix them to get there. Remember, watch out for that low end. Make sure that you're using reference tracks, and, don't get too accustomed to your studio when you go to listen in the car. Remember that it's going to sound different, and that's okay. And also remember that your car doesn't sound good, so don't worry about it. All right, well, that's it. That's it for this video. My name is Inswain with Inswain Audio. Thank you for sticking around to the end. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, name your firstborn child after me, all those things that YouTubers do. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.